really warms the heart.
You don't have a heart.
Yes, I do. It's black. And it beats for you.
Agatha All Along is very gay, and like a good little lesbian, here I am. There have been some tepid attempts at queer representation previously within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka the MCU, so this was a breath of fresh sapphic-laced air. It's got its flaws, while also providing some punch, so let's break this one down. While it offered a tantalizing dynamic between Agatha and Rio, it also, I think, failed to provide the true payoff we were promised. Agatha All Along is the latest Marvel TV show to come out on Disney+, is a spin-off of the hugely popular WandaVision TV series some 3 years back, and ties into the robust Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is based on the extensive comic series. In WandaVision, Agatha played the nosy neighbour, and the character was positively received, so much so that despite being a minor character in the Marvel comics, a spin-off has been in the works for some time. The spin-off centres around Agatha Harkness. She is a witch who was put on trial by the Salemites, her coven back in the 1600s, for using dark magic, which sees her draining her coven dry, including the coven leader, her own mother. Centuries later, she is drawn to Westview by the anomaly Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, created, where an entire village is taken hostage as a result of Wanda losing her love, Vision, where they are forced to play out sitcom scenarios as Wanda's way to cope with her grief. Agatha had hoped to capture and harness Wanda's powerful chaotic magic for herself. Once she reveals herself to Wanda, she ends up in an epic confrontation that sees her defeated. With her powers gone and with Wanda newly minted as the Scarlet Witch, Wanda places her under a spell where she believes herself to be nothing more than the nosy suburban neighbour she'd pretended to be throughout the series.
I'll be seeing you, Agnes.
Not if I see you first, hon.
Agatha All Along picks up 3 years later, where Agatha is still under the spell, deep in the delusion that she is some kind of tough detective, a la Mayor of Easttown, investigating a murder.
You want to take control of my investigation?
No. If you want to be in control, you can be.
However, the world falls apart when a teenage boy breaks and enters into her home, and during the interrogation, he chants an incantation which breaks the spell.
What is that?
At the same time as this is happening, Rio, a woman from her past, surfaces again.
I've missed you. I hate you.
And it's clear that their antagonism is born from a love that turned into pain for reasons we don't know yet.
Admit it. You prefer me.
Horizontal? In a grave?
Rio appears to want some kind of revenge, and though she can't kill Agatha, she forewarns that she will reveal her whereabouts to a group known as the Salem Seven, dark, twisted entities that were once the children of the Salemites she killed centuries ago. The teenage boy who broke her out of her spell has done so because he has been studying magic and has learned about a thing called the Witch's Road, where witches who successfully travel it will at the end be given that which they are missing. Despite this teenager being an enigma himself,
Who are you?
My name is...
Agatha agrees, only too aware of the fact that she is being chased and without her magic is defenseless. They put together a coven of unlikely witches, as a coven is needed in order to access the Witch's Road. These witches each have their own reasons for wanting to go on this journey, and after a rousing round of chanting, they escape just as the Salem Seven bear down on them. In order to reach the end of the road, they must each face a trial, but as we quickly find out, no one is safe from the clutches of death. There are secrets that loom large, and the Salem Seven are not far behind. So I wanted to find out more about queer representation in the MCU because as someone who has watched some but not a whole lot, and certainly doesn't follow the franchise closely, I wanted to contextualize Agatha as a sapphic character. I knew there had been much talk about Valkyrie, played by Tessa Thompson in the Thor movies, being bi, and it was confirmed, but off-screen. She did appear in the more recent film The Marvels, a sequel to the gay-coded Captain Marvel movie, and I heard flutterings that there was meant to be some kind of confirmation that Captain Marvel and Valkyrie are or were girlfriends. But then we got a kiss on the cheek that could easily be read as just friendly. Indeed, it's this kind of level of representation we've by and large been given, where, for example, Carol Danvers has a very close friend in Maria Rambeau and is probably the other mother to Maria's daughter, Monica, but it's not confirmed. Major characters like Loki and Deadpool have had similar treatment where, as far as I can tell, there is very little beyond some perhaps suggestive scenes or a brief passing reference. There is more prominent queer representation with characters like Caroline and Nico from the TV series Runaways, who are girlfriends and they get to kiss, although from what I've heard this show is somewhat disconnected from the greater MCU. There is also Jerry Hogarth, who got her start in Jessica Jones and does more than just kiss ladies. But that aside, the franchise has been pretty queer light. When it comes to Agatha, being the gay that I am, I was certainly clocking some little clues to her leanings in WandaVision.
Young thing like you doesn't have to do much. Shall we?
Oh, we shall. Say, that's some kind of getup you're wearing. Did I leave the oven on, or is that just you, hot stuff?
It makes perfect sense to have Agatha be a sapphic. After all, witches were traditionally single women who didn't seem to need or want a man, and the world of witchy women coming together in covens lends itself delightfully to gayness. I'm so glad they leaned into this so hard because the show didn't just make Agatha queer. No less than 5 of its 6 or 7 core characters were, with Agatha, Rio, Jennifer, Alice, and Teen. This alone makes it the gayest thing the MCU has produced, and with this being the spin-off to one of, if not the best outing from Marvel with WandaVision, this has given Agatha All Along high visibility. This visibility unfortunately led to a trend I've seen occurring all too frequently in mainstream franchises. It's been an invitation for a lot of thinly veiled, and sometimes not so thinly veiled, bigotry to spew forth.
You're telling me they've exhausted every other character in the entire Marvel universe, and we're getting an Agatha TV series? I will never watch that.
Nobody really wanted this fucking thing in the first place. The biggest question that comes to my mind is, who's this show even made for?
Then Catherine Hahn delivers a line that describes this show perfectly.
This is where hope goes to die.
These kind of bad faith takes are sadly unsurprising. This is a tactic taken by those who want to see the material bomb because of a deep entrenched misogyny. And if the show actually turns out to be terrible, then everyone else will pile on with scathing reviews. Agatha All Along does seem to have largely sidestepped that kind of vitriolic avalanche by not turning out to be the hot piece of garbage they predicted. But it does mean that the show has had to work harder to not be maligned and has probably gotten more criticism than a male-centric version would have had. I imagine the influx of sapphics who heard the siren call will no doubt have helped boost ratings and get good buzz going online. Sapphic fandoms do have a knack for that. If my Tumblr dash is anything to go by, the show hit, and it hit hard for a lot of us, in no small part to the tantalizing glimpses we got of Agatha and Rio. It's clear their relationship is significant. Through the series, we see how it is pivotal to Agatha's past and informs a lot of who she has become. Given who Rio is and the job she does, there is the potential for deep symbolism in this relationship, and this was teased in the first half of the series.
I loved someone, and I had to do something that I did not want to do, and it hurt them. She is my scar.
It ties in tightly to what I would say is the core relationship of the show, that of Agatha and Teen, because in Teen, Agatha sees her dead son Nicholas, and Rio is very much implicated in that death. But theirs is also a relationship that is shrouded in mystery, and that mostly remains a mystery. We are given some puzzle pieces to put together, and to an extent, I think it's a great way to offer up fodder for the audience's mind to mull over and theorize. If watching Agatha All Along in weekly installments shows anything, it is that watching an episode a week breathes life into fandom because it gives us time to absorb what we have seen instead of binge sessions that see a show consumed and discarded so quickly. But leaving so much unanswered plays into one of my biggest criticisms of the show. But first, let's look at what I enjoyed. In a broad sense, I think the show did a lot of things right. Naturally, the Agatha and Rio dynamic served as an easy hook in. In the first episode, from the moment Rio arrives, we sense the history, and this is only confirmed with the emotional and, dare I say, sexually charged fight they have, which very clearly spells out that these two women were once lovers and that the depth of their antagonism is only matched by how much they must have loved each other before the betrayal that tore them apart. It's clear that Rio, as much as she appears to want to kill Agatha in this first moment, also loves her deeply, and what's more, even likes her, finds her funny. I liked the repeated sentiment that Rio sees Agatha, that she sees beyond the facade.
Te veo. Te veo.
I watch you, Agatha, just as closely as you watch everyone else.
FYI, big spoilers incoming, so you may want to click off if you don't want to know. There is something epic in the tragedy of their love, with Rio being death. The idea that a being that is as old as life itself has fallen so entirely for this woman is so grand in scale, and this is especially well rendered in Aubrey Plaza's performance, where you feel the history even if we don't get to see much of it. We see her hurt at the hate Agatha throws at her, the devastation when she comes to take Nicholas the first time, probably already knowing that even though she defied the laws of nature to give Agatha 6 years with her kid, 6 years she should have never had, that she would still lose her.
No one in history has had special treatment like you.
You call what you did special treatment?
In the gaps left by the story, how they met can be imagined, probably over some dead corpses, maybe even over the corpses of Agatha's original coven. I read about how the writers even discussed the idea that they lived together in a little cottage somewhere for a time. I could well imagine them working as partners, Agatha draining witches, Rio escorting them to the other side. They even talked of Rio being Nicholas's father, and certainly the moment when Nicholas says,
"My mother needs me home,"
which is not referring to Agatha, who he calls Mama, and the fact that he's not surprised to see Rio when she finally takes him away lends itself to this interpretation. Or, if not Rio having a hand in Nicholas's creation, then perhaps taking on the role as his other mother. There is a lot that can be mined from what we were given, and I thought there was great potential for some potent payoff at the end, but alas, we didn't quite get that, which I'll discuss in my criticisms. Regardless of that, you can see the immense amount of work that went into creating the show. The costumes, sets, and practical special effects were all noteworthy, and the care in their creation is evident. The script was full of very intentional detail, and I would expect no less from the MCU, who deals heavily in details, Easter egg moments, callbacks, and hints, to the point where there are videos out there detailing every Easter egg you might have missed for every episode of the show, pulling on the entire lore of the Marvel Universe. This is both a positive and a negative. I'll discuss the negative in a bit. There are also many homages to witches and witchy lore, which was fun, be it maniacal laughs, using a makeshift cauldron to add weirdly named ingredients, flying on broomsticks, or references to other witchy movies like The Craft or Maleficent. The most overt homage, of course, is when Agatha is dressed as the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz.
She's based on me, you know.
A detail I particularly liked, being the gay that I am, was that of Agatha and Rio's costumes when dressed as the 70s band. Their deep plunging necklines, I have read, was very intentional as a design choice, so that when they had their one-on-one chat in the music booth, they were in essence exposing their hearts to the other, perhaps for the first time in centuries, being vulnerable with each other. Love it. Then there was how we discover, in addition to being on the Titanic when it sunk and on the Hindenburg when it blew up, did she cause these tragedies? Probably. That Agatha is the woman who inspired Dolly Parton's song Jolene, which was just a delightful little detail that speaks to the queers in the know, since this song has very firmly been adopted by sapphics because of how Dolly sure seems to fixate on just how gorgeous Jolene is. Speaking of which, I did enjoy all the little queer asides we got. There was both Jennifer and Alice confirming they're into women.
Do I hate her or do I want her phone number?
Same.
Right? Yeah.
Agatha casually throwing out,
Hey, you want straight answers? Ask a straight lady.
and Rio being entirely dramatic and extra like the gay she is.
Surprise.
My lady.
The use of the song The Witch's Road was definitely a strong point for me. The way it was threaded into the show from the beginning made for a lovely through line that only took on a great deal more significance when its origin is revealed to have been created by Agatha and her son Nicholas, providing a real emotional punch. I appreciated how Agatha's love for her son was interwoven throughout the show, even if she then used it to let fly her darkest tendencies when she used it as a honey trap. There is also a beautiful symmetry with how Alice's mother then used the song as a protection spell for her daughter. I definitely dug that Jennifer got her powers back, and there is something rather fitting that it was Agatha who unknowingly bound her, creating a commentary. The black woman breaking free from a spell that had robbed her of her power at the hands of a white woman. It was followed by the deep catharsis that Jennifer felt at getting her powers back. The tour de force performance in episode 7 by Patti LuPone as Lilia was something to behold, and the episode itself was the best structured and most satisfying of the lot. This episode hit on all levels. It was dynamic with a tightly, carefully crafted script. In jumping back and forth in time, it tied up all of these little seemingly random moments, which is a dopamine rush for sure, and helped to begin the stitching together of previous episodes to create greater coherence. It helped keep the episode moving at a good pace, and then it offered up an emotional conclusion that was so satisfying. This is the level at which I had hoped the entire show would be at, and if it had been, it would have rivaled WandaVision, but alas, it did not. This episode stood out because in comparison, the others were a real mixed bag, making for a patchy experience. The first episode felt weighed down by the sheer amount of Easter egg nods to WandaVision without actually providing, at least I felt, sufficient context for the uninitiated. As I heard one commentator say, this show requires homework, with at the very least having watched WandaVision. I'm just glad I had randomly binged the show shortly before Agatha All Along premiered, but I still had to read articles and watch videos on the Easter eggs to truly understand what I was seeing. It's a bit intense to need all that to properly contextualize a show, which yes, it is part of a sprawling franchise, so some Easter eggs to the loyal viewers are expected. However, it should not be done at the expense of the integrity of the narrative and the pacing. It then led to an overly protracted amount of time in the Mayor of Easttown world, with references being made to Wanda now being dead, referencing the Darkhold and its destruction, which would play very little into the series. Don't get me wrong, it was a fun callback having us start out like this, which establishes that Agatha has been living in this TV world, but unlike the comedies of WandaVision, it's a much grittier place, reflective of her state of mind and how her subconscious is trying to break free from the spell with the mystery that keeps pointing to little clues of the truth, but she's unable to do so. Also, Agatha dramatically swanning around this fake world, possibly imagining Rio into the story. I'm not convinced she was actually there, but probably a figment of Agatha's imagination. And sitting like she did was a fun way to have Agatha's subconscious gay it up. It just should have been way shorter because it felt like it dragged out the real start of the show, which is getting to the Witch's Road. The second episode felt like it was picking up steam with Agatha and Billy looking for their coven as the threat of the Salem 7 hung over them. But once on the Witch's Road, the trials didn't gel for me. It felt like they lacked cohesion in and of themselves, and while they looked to be requiring the witches to each work on their traumas, it just didn't hit the way WandaVision hit. And yes, I know I keep comparing this to WandaVision, but as a successor to that series, I think it's a fair comparison, especially as WandaVision was set up in such a way that without knowing anything about the MCU, you could come in and watch this and the show is still an immensely satisfying watch. Given how The Witch's Road came to be, the reveal that Teen is in fact Billy Maximoff, Wanda's son, and that he used his powers like his mother to create a fantasy world, with the reveal that The Witch's Road was conjured into existence by Billy, it made more sense. I guess he created the trials based off what he thought it should be and some desire to confront his own trauma, but before that reveal, I couldn't help but feel like something wasn't working about it, and not in a good way. When episode 7 came along and was such a banger, it merely highlighted this sentiment further. In fact, by its quality, it threw a lot of flaws of the show into sharper relief. Seeing Lilia's character get such a thoughtful death highlighted that Alice's death was not given its due. Alice's death played as quite underwhelming in the moment and felt incomplete even with the little scene at the start of episode 8. It also made Agatha even more unlikable because though she said she couldn't control her succubus abilities, she later on shows that she is very capable. She just didn't care about Alice and was fine to have her die. I have to admit that I did find Agatha at times difficult to like. Her sequence with her son helped redeem her a little, it softened her, and I wish we'd gotten just a bit more of that kind of framing. And also, I wish we'd seen the sequence with her son happen before the climax of the show, which instead happened in episode 8. But I think really should have been in episode 9, because then it felt like we got an entire episode that felt more like a postscript to the story, which added to the patchy overall pacing of the show. But more importantly, what I really wanted was some kind of payoff within the Agatha and Rio dynamic. I wanted to get more of their backstory, as it seemed like this had been promised with how the relationship was framed, from the spicy tension-filled fighting to their one-on-one scenes scattered throughout, and the softness of the hug and the almost kiss. I get that it was, as the showrunner Jack Schaefer said, more than they could fit in, so fine, I can imagine my own scenarios, but I am disappointed, and the lack of it makes me feel like their relationship is consequently underserved to the show's detriment. This is compounded by something I feel was very much needed to make the resolution of the series work, and that is having Agatha forgive Rio for taking Nicholas. The climax of the series cried out for it. This relationship was framed to be an expression of her deeply seated grief, so it feels necessary, for me at least, to provide a shift in that dynamic to give us a payoff at the end. I'm not necessarily calling for her to have some kind of redemption. I personally love a good redemption, but I can roll with that not being the case. She could remain the complicated, selfish and murderous witch she is, and also forgive Rio. It therefore meant that the kiss we got didn't offer the payoff it promised. I mean, I enjoyed the kiss in many ways. The lady sure went for it, and I deeply appreciate that. It's not a passionless peck on the lips. In it is the full weight of all their love, hate, hurt, grief, and longing all rolled into one. I also deeply appreciate that it was inserted in just such a way that it couldn't be edited out, because it is literally how Agatha dies, through the kiss of death. While it was wonderful to see this full-on, very gay kiss on my screen, followed by the gorgeous visuals of Agatha levitating to her death, I also felt cheated because this was not the kiss of reconciliation promised in episode 4. When Agatha went to kiss Rio in episode 4, it seemed that Agatha was ready to mend bridges. To have the actual kiss in episode 8 not be a successor of the hug and almost kiss in episode 4 that promised the reunion of these two women, but rather as a way to protect Billy, which also doesn't actually make sense since Billy is still throwing off the natural order of things and should not be alive. Agatha dying doesn't change that, so I guess Rio is once again bending the rules for Agatha. That woman has it bad. Like I said, I felt cheated. It robbed much of the climax for me. I didn't mind Agatha doing it to save Billy. It made sense that as her surrogate son, she would want to protect him, but in not allowing Agatha to forgive Rio as well, the moment then stops being about Agatha's journey and pivots to being about Billy's. And not that I hated this plot point on its own either, but this is compounded with the reveal that Billy is the one who created the Witch's Road, and it led me to feeling like Agatha got sidelined in her own story to make it all about Billy. It was Billy all along, not Agatha. And that kind of bait and switch honestly feels like a betrayal of what the show promises in its very title. I feel like with Agatha forgiving Rio, Agatha getting sidelined could have been avoided, because then the climax of the show remains about her and her emotional journey, not a manipulation by Billy to save himself. She was quite ready to go walking off and leave him to his death for a hot minute there, and perhaps you could say that Agatha sacrificing herself for Billy is the emotional growth, but we know that Agatha would have given her life for her son in a heartbeat, so this was not Agatha growing as a character, it was Billy using his knowledge of her deepest wound, sticking in a poker to get what he wanted. Yes, indeed, it must be acknowledged that it's yet another gay that gets buried. The fact that Agatha comes back in ghost form, which is just another wedge between her and Rio,
Hey, ghosts.
it at least does help lessen the impact because she still exists, and if they follow the comics, will even resurrect at some point, so even though my first thought was I didn't like it, I can work with it. Have Agatha become a ghost because she's not ready to face her son. Have her become Billy's spirit guide. Not my first choice, but I can appreciate they're serving a wider narrative. Still, it's a gay that got buried, and to boot, at the very moment of the kiss, just hitting the bury your gays jackpot. So yes, a decent if uneven show, and that meant it never quite got me like WandaVision got me, even with the gay, because it didn't, if you ask me, deliver on the promises it made, leaving me disappointed and somewhat frustrated, especially in the wake of how epic the Agatha and Rio dynamic promised to be. Still, I'll probably think about these two way more than my feelings about the show should allow. Do share your thoughts on all of this in the comments, and why not check out my review on the Wheel of Time. If you like this show, then you will probably like that one. Until next time, lady lovers.